May is coming swiftly toward us, and I am continuing my look at all of the different warbands that I might be taking over to Warhammer World this year. We're kind of going through them one by one, weighing up the pros and cons, and seeing exactly how I play them. Today, we are going to be re-looking at Hunters of Huanchi. This is a warband that I have not played for 3 years or something. This is after spending a solid year on them, just grinding out those games, grinding out those events to try and do it. I think they got chops now. I mean, well, they always had chops because I managed to do well with them. But I think that with the update that we had in August, the update that we had in November, I think that they are a lot better than they used to be. And there were the points changes that we had not in 2020 but in 2024. That also did some things with blowpipes, which I never really managed to explore, never really managed to look at. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be revisiting Hunters of Huanchi. We're going to be looking at them in a new light for this 2026 format that we're in, and we're going to be seeing what kind of list that I can build to bring possibly in May at Warhammer World. If you're watching this and you are one of the 30% of people who's managed to make it more than 30 seconds into my video, which means you actually care what it's about. So if you want to see more videos like this, there are a couple of things that you can do. You can give me a like, you can give me a subscribe, put a comment down in the comment section below, tell me what you think about the video itself. And if you want to give me some more support, you can come and join me on Discord, you can join my Patreon, you can join me as a channel member right here on YouTube. But for those of you who are already watching, a big thank you for myself, and let's get back to the video. Here we are. Here are all of the different options that I have for Hunters of Huanchi. There's a lot of stuff because over that year I built a whole bunch of different things. We've got the core of the warband, we've got the Startlet Stalkers, we've got things like Quiet Pock and Calthea, we've got the Slaan that I never ended up bringing, we've got all sorts of things to this. But let's go over it, like Hunters of Huanchi within the context of what happened in August and then again in November. They got their battle trait, Hidden Hunters. Hidden Hunters isn't all that good for pure Hunters of Huanchi. You basically get to move around different fighters into different battle groups. I would much prefer if you were just able to stack battle groups with any amount of fighters that you wanted, but you cannot do that, unfortunately. So it doesn't really help. Hunters, still, the core of their warband isn't super fantastic outside of claws, so that's not really going to help us. But what did happen? In November, we had the changes that went through to Divine Blessings. The damage blessing and the attack blessing got more expensive for those really big fighters, which kind of works in our favor. And then on top of that, in November, what we had was Onslaught went to a triple and Rampage kind of got nerfed into oblivion. So what does this mean? This means that the average damage the warbands are putting out are generally going to be a lot less. So something like Hunters of Huanchi, which is still, in my view, going to be revolving around how many activations they can kind of ignore with their reaction slippery. A little bit like the Fleshy Quartz list that I brought last year. I think that really works in their favor, because if we're talking about Huanchi's claws, and even your basic skink, right? Your basic skink has 8 wounds. So your opponent, what they have to do in one attack action, they have to do 8 wounds to stop you from slippering away if they start combat with you, effectively. And it's harder than ever to do 8 wounds or 10 wounds if we're talking about a claw, or maybe even 14 wounds if we're talking about a blessed claw. So I think because of that, we are still going to be looking at a very versatile core to a warband. I wouldn't say that I would go all the way and bring Hunters of Huanchi as like your main warband without any allies. I still think that's a mistake, but as the core to a warband that's kind of fast, that can do damage at range, that can slippery out the way, that has a lot of weird tricks, I still think is very good. They still have agile climbers, so they still basically get to ignore verticality with terrain, which is useful, especially in the UK, as we do have a lot of vertical terrain. They still have envenomed weapons to get +1 damage, which is fine. Now, the two main abilities, we're going to call it, are going to be Held Bolus and Bellow of the Carnosaur. Held Bolus can only be used by guys with boluses. So in this case, your basic, oh, where is it? There we go. Your basic chameleons with boluses, and your leader, who's going to have bolus and shield in this case. There he is. That's kind of as good as it's always been. I guess the stocks have gone up slightly, considering that Onslaught has become a triple, but Hunters were never really using their doubles anyway for Onslaught because they all had ranged abilities. So I think it's fine. In times past, I would have taken, and here they are, 2 skinks with boluses, just to have that ability along with the leader with bolus, to have 1 bolus in every single deployment zone. So you at least have the option to use that ability. I don't necessarily think that's required now. I think Bellow of the Carnosaur, which your Huanchi's claws get, I think stocks in that have gone way, way up. So you're not necessarily going to be using that bolus as much as you would have been. Just as a reminder, Bellow of the Carnosaur, pick a guy within 6 inches, -1 move, and -1 damage points. So you're turning an already, let's say, nerfed fighter in terms of damage just by what's happened to Onslaught, what's happened to Divine Blessings. You're making it even weaker and you're reducing their move. So it's still a top tier ability, and I think that's still why we're going to be taking Huanchi's Claws still as the core of our warband. Now, something that did actually happen, and something that I've always wanted to explore, is there was a big buff to Chameleon Skinks with Dark Pipes. Now, previously, I think they were like 70 points or something, and it was like, why would you ever bring a Chameleon Skink? Because they are 5 points less expensive than a Huanchi's Claw, and that's basically it. But I think at 60 points, they allow you to really pad out your warband, and pad it out a lot. They still have Slippery, whose stocks have gone up, as we've just talked about, where with things that have got a lot weaker. They do have Dark Pipes, it means they can technically do something at range. They're not really going to do much. But I think 60 points for 8 wounds with movement 6 is fine. So I've always wanted to experiment with much larger Hunters of Huanchi warbands with Chameleon Skinks with Dark Pipes. Even just like Skinks with Moonstone Clubs going down to 65, I think that's a bit of a bargain, actually, considering what you get. It's like a basic 3-3-1-3, 8 wounds, toughness 3, whatever. It is movement 6, so it gets to go places and it gets to throw things. So yeah, maybe we'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at like your basic troops a lot more. But let's talk about what I brought before. Now, the most successful version of this list was like the last version that I had. So we had the leader, we had a whole bunch of Huanchi's Claws. Huanchi's Claws, as a reminder, these guys I made using the basic skinks and the Blood Bowl kit. So that's basically what we did. We got the headdresses, put them on the skinks. So this is it, right? I think this is always going to be our core. It's going to be 6 Huanchi's Claws and a leader. And this is what I took before, right? We got the claws, we got the leader. I decided to take Calthea with me, and then I decided to take Pock and Haskell Hexbane. And I think it was slightly bigger. I think it was like this or something. It was like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11 models. And that was basically it. So the idea is that you've got Calthea. Calthea gets to move people around. Calthea gets to tell Pock to shoot multiple times. Pock gets to use its double to do explosive bolts. Generally, like this was the combo. You got Hexbane, Pock, and Calthea, and they would basically be zipping around the battlefield, punching people to death. Hexbane is a decent little fighter in itself. He's still good. They are still good. So that's what I bought before, but I had a whole bunch of different variations. One of the builds was the 6 claws. We took the Starblood Stalkers, well, 3 members of the Starblood Stalkers, rather. We took my best version people in the Starblood Stalkers. And then on that, we took this guy, who is an Aether Chemist. The real good thing about the Aether Chemist is basically a shooting attack. It's like 6 shots at range 6, strength 4, 1-3, 155 points. And what I used to do with this guy is boost its strength. So it becomes like a 6-5-1-3, always winning on 3s. Those 6 shots, shooting twice, would basically just start mincing stuff. This was before the nerfed Fight for Profit, or it might have been after, just after the nerfed Fight for Profit, where it would get +1 to the attacks characteristic of basically everyone around it. So the idea is you could play an Aether Chemist, he would go get a piece of treasure, and then you could put Huanchi's Claws around him, and then suddenly they go from like 2 shots doing 1-4 damage to 3 shots doing 1-4 damage. And then that would combo really well with Kixie Taka, because Kixie Taka is a wizard. He's got the wizard bolt, so that 2 shots goes up to 3 shots on Kixie Taka. And it was a massive force multiplier on top of all the damage that he could do. Now, I don't think we're going to go the Aether Chemist route again. I think that there are more exciting things that we could be taking now. But that's just an idea of what I took before. And then I tried a whole bunch of different things. I tried Achillean Kings, I tried Mizzen Masters, I basically tried the lot. But going forward, what kinds of lists do we think that I could bring? Now, one of the ideas that I had, and it was something that I was testing fairly heavily, was running the claws and then giving them the wounds blessing. They have 10 wounds anyway, so that makes them kind of tanky. But if you give them 14 wounds, suddenly they become ridiculously hard to kill, especially with Slippery, because there are very few fighters that are going to do 14 wounds in one shot. That's the long and the short of it. I still think that that's a decent enough idea. Now, it does hurt them that the Wounds Blessing has actually gone up in points. So they're going to be like 95 points for a range 8, 2, 3, 1, 4, movement 6, 14 wounds. It's something. It's definitely something, but it's a lot of points to give it to all of these guys. You're looking at 120 points just to give these the Wounds Blessing. So I don't know about that. It's definitely a route that we can go down. One of the things I definitely do want to go down is you've got the Skink Alpha. You used to always give it Bolus because Bolus was just good. Now the Alpha with Dart Pipe, because it got the Dart Pipe buff. Yes, the Dart Pipe buff. Everything with the Dart Pipe got cheaper. Now it's only 80 points instead of 90 points. And I think that just being able to save those 10 points and putting those points somewhere else, I think is actually invaluable in a list like this because you want it to be as big as possible. You want to do a whole bunch of different things with your models. So I think that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to, instead of taking an Alpha with a Bolus, we'll take an Alpha with a Dart Pipe, bank those 10 points, and see where we go. Now, this core of 7 fighters is 530 points. So that means we have 470 points to play with. What are the different options that we can look at? Now, one of the main option that I was testing at the time was a Slaan. We've all seen the Slaan. This is the model that I made for my Amazons, and this was always going to be the model for that Slaan. It just never came about. So, yes, a Slaan is a thing. Yes, a Slaan is always good. I think at the time, it was a really weird list. I was like comboing it with Calthea to get extra shots off from the Slaan, and then there was another build where I had the Slaan, Pock, and Haspel Hexbane to kind of just shoot everything to death whilst my Huanchi's Claws were kind of doing their thing. That's very expensive because Pock and Hexbane themselves, like, the numbers don't really fit all that well. There is a possibility that you can do some kind of variation with the Slaan and still make it work, but like, I don't want to fall on the Slaan as being like, oh yeah, I'm just going to bring a Slaan and the Slaan's going to win games for me. Because in my experience, the Slaan is basically hit or miss, right? It's either amazing or it's not all that good. And that's why you need to bring another support piece, either in Calthea or in Pock and Hexbane, to kind of do the job when the Slaan isn't there. Now, from testing of Riverblades, though, there's some interesting stuff going on. I've been thinking about Pureflood Seneschals with Yulthara darts. Again, we've seen this already. These were in my Riverblades warband. A Seneschal with Yulthara darts, with the Strength Blessing, has the same average damage as a Slaan, but at 220 points or whatever, as opposed to the near 300 points that a Slaan is. And on top of that, they do have the very excellent, and we know it's excellent, Riverblades ability, which is just always good. So they get to move around, they get to do a whole bunch of shots, they get to do Riverblades, which is actually quite useful in this particular warband. Because I don't really have any doubles that I'm using, it's always useful to have a really high value double in there. And on top of that, a really high value quad. But having 2 fighters with Riverblades kind of dancing around doing plink damage, whilst these guys are dancing around kind of living doing plink damage, I think there's a lot of synergy between the two. They do also have an ability where they get to give everyone within their range like +1 movement, which suddenly makes these guys movement 6 going up to movement 7 ridiculously fast. So I think that might actually be an option, right? We do something like this. We bring the double Seneschal, the 7 guys, that goes up to 9, and then we can probably fit a couple of Dart Pipes to go to 10 or to go to 11. I think that would be a really good build, just like in general, and it would lean into the kind of way that I like to play. It'd basically be playing Riverblades, but instead of melee guys, you have range guys instead. So I think that's a really good shout. One of the other things I've been looking at very seriously, just because of what people have been bringing, are the new Null Khemist. Well, is the new Null Khemist, right? And I put together this model. This model was originally for a Mizzen Master, and it's kind of like my generic, okay, I'm going to have a Flying Ally model, right? You got the Amazon, she's leaping off the tree. Pretty cool. Null Khemist. The Null Khemist has that shooting attack, which I really like. It's a 6-6-2-2, which means it's basically always winning on 3s. With 2-2 damage, we're looking at 4 hits, which is 8 damage. So we're looking at a similar amount of damage to the Pureflood Seneschal with Yilthara darts. The only difference is that the Seneschal gets to use River Blades, so even on the turn that it moves, or on the action that it moves, it gets to do 2 damage. And if we talk about River Blades, this thing basically gets to move, shoot, do 4 damage through River Blades, and still do 4-4-2-3, where this thing does a 6-6-2-2. But it's got the ability, it's got a couple of different abilities, right? It's got Master of the Skies, which is +1 damage to flying things. There are enough flying things in the game that you might seriously want to consider this. But that's not really the reason why you're taking it. The reason why you're taking it is because of its protection from the Void triple. Again, a very good triple, so it will be competing here. I think it's a good enough triple that you kind of want to warrant taking it. Unit can't be affected by enemy abilities until the start of their next activation. So what we've seen is an increase in the amount of direct damage abilities that things like to do. Domiton is the example that I always give, but you've got things like Domiton, you've got things like Averon Stormsire with his triple, you've got the Wood Elf guy who people like to bring nowadays. They all have direct damage abilities basically, and this effectively makes him immune to that, which is very good. It's a chunk of damage that he's basically not going to take. But on top of that, what it does, you add 2 to the damage characteristic of the unit's attack actions if the target has the Mystic or Priest remarks. Mystic or Priest, what kind of things have the Mystic or Priest remarks? Now, if you're like us and you are in an environment where people like to bring Khorne and they like to bring Slaughter Priests, those things are priests, so you will get the bonus damage. Similarly, with the Realm Gore Ritualist, you'll get the bonus damage. Against Hellsmiths of Hashut, their wizard, I think, or is it the other one? One of them has the priest remark. You'd be surprised at the amount of stuff that has the applicable remarks to get the bonus 2 damage. And if we talk about bonus 2 damage, it becomes a 6-6-4-4, which is ridiculous against it. If it ever comes against a Slaan, which happens to have the Mystic remark like all other wizards do, it will rip through a Slaan, right? A 6-6-4-4 at 8 inches. It's going to be doing at least, 16 wounds? Which is half the amount of damage that a Slaan can take. So I think that there are enough fighters in the game that you would realistically want to use Protection of the Void against, that the Mystical Priest with remarks will totally work. On top of that, he does have one more ability, Atmospheric Isolation, which is -1 attacks from enemy fighters within 6 inches of this fighter. That is very, very appealing, okay? Now, we've already talked about Huanchi's Claws and how they've got the ability to reduce damage, but reducing attacks at a 6-inch range is kind of massive. I know Vexmore has seen a big old drop in usage since his nerfs. But let's take Vexmore, for example. If he does manage to use the triple, he goes up to 3 attacks. He'll go down to 2 attacks with this thing, and 2 attacks is not doing nearly enough damage as you need to do. Any of those big super fighters that we are all always scared of will manage to stop to that. So that's why I like the idea of the Null Khemist. The list again would be something like your basic 7 guys, you put in your Null Khemist in there to make 8, you put a couple of guys in there to make 10, and that's basically where you would be. So that's another option. I really like the Null Khemist. I think it gives a lot of interesting tricks, but I think personally, I think this is what we'd be going for, because they do what Hunters do, and they kind of synergize with each other in terms of how they want to play. Not necessarily the abilities, but how they want to actually play and do the damage. And these guys can dish out so much damage that it makes for a real easy prospect for Huanchi's Claws to be able to plink off those last couple of wounds.